rehabilitation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a man with legal standing in the United States, with an American wife, with zero due process. So he's sitting in that detention facility in El Salvador, and our administration claims that there's nothing they can do to facilitate his return. Awful. So what do? We fight. We fight. We have, thank you. We have weekly protests right here in Lafayette every Tuesday night from 5 to 6. Clear your calendars, stop making excuses, and get down there and peacefully protest. But most important tonight, we are here to fight for our beloved champion in the House of Representatives, Marc DeSaulnier. Thank you so much.
In one day. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank the new police chief and his staff, and I also want to thank the school district and Acalanes High School. I was just talking, we were talking to one of our security people, and we were taking a trip down memory lane about how we used to play basketball in arenas like this, and the glory days as Bruce Springsteen wrote about, and can still remember some of it. I just really want to thank you all for being here. We're going to go through the PowerPoint, and then we'll take the questions. We have done more, our office, myself and my wonderful staff, have done more town halls in the last 10 plus years that I've been in Congress than any other member of Congress, the other 534. And more in-person ones. So while I agree with the mayor's introduction in terms of the difficulty of the time, this is a congressional taxpayer town hall, so we listen to everybody. Republicans, Democrats, and we want your input. One of the joys of this country when we're working well is that we work through the system and we can have passionate, extraordinary debates, and then we have work product that no one physically gets hurt by. Unfortunately, we're living in one of those trying times that Thomas Paine talked about at the founding of this country. So, I'm going to go through the PowerPoint, take the questions, and it's really fun to be here. I feel like, does anybody have a basketball? It's like glory days, I'm sorry. I can only vaguely remember. We were both point guards. All right. So this, if you can see it, and for people who are watching online, and thank you to the Contra Costa television station and their staff. They used to watch me when I was on the Board of Supervisors for hours every Tuesday morning, so thank you for the work you do, and they're great at allowing us to professionally have this recorded, but also for people who can't be here to follow us on Zoom or Facebook. So we just start with this. One of the things about I alluded to in the first comment is because this is taxpayer funded, it can't be too political. It can't be political. Now that's a really hard line to define, but as the ranking senior member on the House Ethics Committee, of which I'm very proud of, that I was asked to do that by Speaker, or soon-to-be Speaker, Leader Jeffries from New York, we follow the rules. So, thanks. When I do political town halls, I'm not AOC, but I'm more like her. I will tell you, I've been getting a lot of comments when I'm out at events, more political events, particularly for younger people, and somebody said in Walnut Creek 2 weeks ago, you know, we really like you, but you need to be more like AOC. So I walked up to her on the floor after I heard that, and I said, you know, you're doing great, but I got a beef with you. And she's used to my sense of humor. She goes, what? I said, I just had a constituent who said I need to be more like you. And she said, what'd you say? I said, look at me. She laughed. So anyways, the town hall, if it's not as political as you would like, it's because we're adhering to the House rules. But I will say, you can't have a town hall in American democracy without talking about politics. So it's just the openly campaigning part of it. And it's tough. I mean, you can imagine you're sitting here processing it, but we're going to adhere to the House rules as best we can. Next. So this is our district. There are 435 House districts in the House of Representatives, 100 U.S. senators, and if you can make this out, this is basically the Berkeley Hills here. That's 680 right through the middle of it. So we go out to all of eastern Contra Costa County, and this little wedge here is Discovery Bay. That's in Congressman Harder's district. And then most of the shoreline that I have represented in the past is in Congressman Garamendi's district. So we moved from West County down into San Ramon in Dublin and then further east. So one of 435. A couple little things about this district you won't be surprised by. It's one of the highest education rates of the 435. It's in the top 20, I believe. And I'm not sure about this, but I'm going to find out. It's the 5th wealthiest by household income, but it's the wealthiest, most diverse. If it isn't the most, I'll find out for sure. It's one of the most combination of household wealth and diversity, which I think is wonderful. So that's that. Elections are important. So unfortunately, to the mayor's, I thought we were going to win the House. The numbers were difficult in the Senate, just because that's every 6 years. So depending on what the cycle is of how many Senate seats you have to defend, depending on which party you're in, and how many retirements we get, it becomes more challenging. So that was going, most of the experts said that was going to be hard. If you remember, before this past election, it was 50-50 and the vice president broke the tie. So now we're short. In the House, normally in these cycles, in the middle of the party that's in control of the White House, we would have picked up more seats, but we lost. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we really have to do some honest soul searching for the things we did wrong for those of us in the minority party. So that's the makeup, but if you don't have the votes, you can't get a lot done. It doesn't mean you can't do things and be effective, but it is, and because it's so polarized right now, and I'll talk to some of the reasons why I believe it is, particularly independent expenditures, it's very hard for people to reach across, and particularly difficult, in my view, for the majority party, the Republican Party, because they know that if they deviate and work with us on big things, they are going to get millions of dollars spent in a primary. And I can go in detail about how that has happened over the years. But the big decision was a Supreme Court decision, 5-4 decision called Citizens United, that allowed independent expenditures to be unlimited while direct campaign donations are appropriately monitored. That's why there's certain names I have a hard time saying, but the man who, Elon Musk, that's why he could spend $250 million on independent expenditures in the last election. I don't think that's democracy. It's at least not my version of democracy. So people are rightly saying, and to the mayor's point, angry about what's happening in this country right now. So I have said we underestimated this. I mean, for one thing, we really thought we were going to win, but we were prepared, but not to the level that we should have been. So we're learning, and we're doing better all the time. For me, I've had a lot of town halls I like to work. I think I've got a reputation of working very hard. The Hill did a bio of me some time ago, and they described me as one of the hardest working members of Congress, which was great until I started meeting my colleagues on the floor who read the article, and I'm like, don't get mad at me. You all work hard. We can be a little competitive, us politicians. So anyways, these are things we've done. The Department of Education we'll talk more about, but we're doing everything and more constantly. So I always say we're going to fight in Congress, in the minority, we're going to fight in the courts, and we'll talk about that in another slide, and we're going to fight in the streets. And that doesn't mean fighting physically. It means going and following the letter of the law, but being demonstrative about how this is unacceptable to those of us who find it unacceptable, which means Democrats. So these are how many executive orders he's had. The judicial process, because we're in the minority, we've put a lot of work into this. As I've told you, people who are frequent flyers to these, Jamie Raskin, a wonderful, brilliant colleague. Yeah. And Joe Neguse, two brilliant. Jamie's from Maryland. Joe is from Colorado. They are in charge of our rapid response team in the Democratic caucus, and a lot of that is working with partners in the courts right now. We've been really good at this, and Jamie is a very dear, close friend. He's a survivor of cancer like me. He's also a survivor of suicide. In my case, my dad. In his case, his son. Really tragic, and he's brilliant. 2 degrees from Harvard. Not that Harvard says anything. Where is our staff person? Where's Nadeem? One of our staff people is wonderful. There he is. Wave. He just got accepted to Harvard Law School, so we're giving him a bad time. I don't know why anyone would want to leave working for me to go to Harvard Law School, but so that's what they're doing. And in his first administration, he lost almost 80% of the court cases. In this one, we're doing better. As of right now, the decisions have been about 93%. So tariffs can be very effective. I'm reading a book on President McKinley, and he used tariffs before, unfortunately, he was assassinated, and his vice president, Teddy Roosevelt, took over, a Republican president. But you can't do them the way we're doing them. They're largely thoughtless. In my very strong view, the economists are saying that. The stock market has been saying that, bouncing back and forth. So using them the way we're doing, you can see what the effect of, is that today? You know, I don't know about you, but every day you're wondering which way it's going to go. So it's very ineffective. Being globally competitive, bringing back manufacturing, those are things we could agree with. There are a lot of things about globalism that I think has been very good. The sort of classic Keynesian idea that we tie our economies together and there's less strife and less wars, and that has held true since the Clinton administration we did this. But the problem, in my view, is it hasn't, Jack Kennedy quote, "A rising tide rises all boats." Well, it hasn't risen all boats. And having grown up in New England and having been on Cape Cod many times, I've seen what Jack Kennedy was talking about. Not everybody has the boats that the Kennedys had. So God bless him, I love him, but if you've ever been to Hyannisport, everybody doesn't get a boat. So globalism and tariffs can, if they're done effectively, leads to more peace and prosperity for everybody. One of the things that's happened in the world is the poverty rates have gone much lower globally. But the United States, unfortunately, and I'm going to get to this, the benefit of globalism has not been realized by enough working people. And it's not just that we've hollowed out manufacturing, which we have and we shouldn't have, but it's also that we've set up a policy, regulatory, and tax scheme that values capital investments much higher than wages. And that's the problem. Lincoln said, wages, labor, and capital must always be balanced in America, and if they get too far out of balance, you've lost democracy. And I'll show you a chart shortly that demonstrates how dangerous a time we are right now for that. Next. Right on cue. So three of these people have more wealth than half of us. And that's not good. There's nothing wrong with success and being successful and making money, but historically, we're out of balance right now. Thomas Piketty, if anybody has read his difficult theses, he's a French historical economist. He wrote a famous book. He won the Pulitzer and maybe the Nobel for a book called Capital, and he just goes through how in developed economies over the years, when you get this kind of concentration of wealth, humans don't like that. It's unfair. So it's fine to be successful, but not at this level. And this is a picture of these gentlemen in the Capitol Rotunda when the swearing in happened, which I was not at. I agree with you. So this is just some of the quotes from the judges. And these are judges that have been appointed by the current president and Democratic presidents, but we should do that in the future, just who appointed these judges. But I particularly like this one. An American president is not a king, not even the unelected one, and his power to remove federal officers and honest civil servants is not absolute, but may be constrained in appropriate circumstances, as are present here. So that was a decision that stopped some of the firings and layoffs. And for us here, a lot of you may not know, but Region 9 of the federal government is in San Francisco. So this is very impactful. We've got a lot of federal employees here. So the country is divided in regions, starting in DC, and that we're 9. And there's a very significant federal workforce here, and they do great work. And big organization, as a former small business owner, having run multiple restaurants and owned them, very thin margin restaurants, you're going to have great people and you're going to have different people. The federal government is no different than that. But from my experience, the people who work in the public sector in this country, you're going to get emotional. We're very lucky. That's not to say we can't be better, but we've got a lot of great public employees. So I mentioned about the rapid response team, the oversight committee, and we want you to share your personal stories. So tell us what's happening, what you think, and we'll share those online, but it will also go into a collection of personal stories, which is important. You can talk about numbers a lot, I love doing that, but you need a translation into real human stories. And then oversight, this is another thing that unfortunately this administration has tacked. I was on the oversight committee for the first 8 years I was in Congress with Mr. Ruskin and Elijah Cummings, another remarkable member, God rest his soul, from Baltimore. But we have rules protecting whistleblowers in the federal government. So there are rules. You can come forward and say where there's waste, fraud, and abuse, and we're going to do more of that. And then we've been working with the California Attorney General, a wonderful friend and colleague from Alameda, at the city of Alameda in Alameda County, Rob Bonta, and other attorney generals to try to express ourselves in the courts and make sure that we do better than the 78% of the cases we won the first 4 years. And we are so far. Okay. And this is from the Wall Street Journal today. So I've talked about the concentration of wealth. This is the concentration of wealth in the top 0.00001% in the U.S. as a share of total U.S. household wealth. So we're the 5th wealthiest district out of 435 in the House of Representatives. That's this measurement. That's 1920. So the Gilded Age, that's what happened at the Gilded Age. And that's what gave us, historians tell us, 2 world wars and the Great Depression. And then we, mostly through policy and a consensus amongst Americans, we changed the tax code. We had more regulations. Yes, there are bureaucracy, but there's value in it when it's done right. So this is where the middle class really grew. President Eisenhower, I often tell people, my Republican colleagues, the country would be better if we had a tax system like President Eisenhower had. And historically, it's accurate. And this is where we are now, 2000. And this was today, according to the Wall Street Journal. So this concentration of wealth is largely from all of us who are lucky enough to own houses that are worth a lot and also have investments. But it's really shared tightly, as we just showed in the previous one, amongst very, very wealthy people. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, except that when it's this concentrated, it's bad for everybody. And you don't have the middle class and you don't have the disposable income to generate an economy that works for everybody. And I know this acutely because when you're in the restaurant business, you measure disposable income in your marketplace all the time. fixed household costs are housing, transportation, health care, taxes, and education. I'm looking around the room. For us baby boomers, used to be about 25%, 35%. The rest of it was money you got to spend to travel or go to a restaurant. That's why I followed it all the time. It's now, for our kids and grandkids, it's closely approximating 50%. And that's why so many young people are disaffected, because they don't have the opportunity. Standing here in Lafayette, California, that we were fortunate enough to buy houses, and they've gone up a lot. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that it makes it harder for younger people to have the same kind of opportunities that we all had. And we can correct that without taking money from middle-class Americans. We just have to go back to the tax system that we had when Eisenhower was president. That's the first rule of town halls. The first rule of town halls is not take the microphone in front of the speaker. All right, you get another.
Hello again, everyone. Oh, there we go. I think we're good. So we're going to go into the question and answer portion of the town hall. Before we do so, we just wanted to take a brief moment of silence for the life of a student, Amin Narozi, who was a student here at this school at Akalani's, who passed away recently. So if we could just take a brief moment of silence on his behalf. Thank you all. So for the question and answer portion, we do have a large number of questions. If right now you have a question card that's filled out, you could raise it in the air, and one of those staff members that I mentioned before are going to come around and grab them for you. So we have Brooke and Endem coming down on each side. So for the sake of fairness, we are going to randomly select the questions out of the bucket and read those questions. I will flag, as the Congressman stated in the beginning of the PowerPoint presentation, any political related or campaign related questions we are unable to ask. So respectfully, I will have to skip those and stick to specifically congressional related questions. Would you like to do the honors, sir, for the first one?
Oh. Some people question of whether we filter these or not, so this is why we do this, or choose them.
First question is from Jeff. What is the plan to stop the clown show? They have a very organized plan and are executing it. Why don't we have an organized plan where we all see it, participate, and have real impact?
You're right. I mentioned this at the beginning. We've got to be much more aggressive everywhere. And one of my favorite stories about Frederick Douglass, if you remember Frederick Douglass, there's a story about him going up to his house when Lincoln made him the Marshal of Washington, D.C., which is quite an extraordinary thing at that time or any time, but particularly then, making a runaway slave Marshal of Washington, D.C. So he walks up to his house, and if you ever go to D.C., it's one of my favorite places to go. The mall's great. It's part of the national park system. So he walks up to the house, and there's a young African-American man waiting for him. And he goes, "Young man, Douglas goes, what can I do for you? What are you waiting here for?" And the young man looks up and says, "Well, Mr. Douglas, I respect you, and I'm starting out my life. I wanted to come and get advice from you. What should I do to be successful in life?" And Douglas looks at me and goes, "Agitate, agitate, agitate." So that's what we need to do. We need to agitate, agitate, agitate. And for the people who disagree with us, join us. But explain how doing what you're doing, which is, to me, is in complete defiance of what I see of this country, is we have a constitution that is not perfect, but it's allowed this country to be this amazing existence of what America's about accepting the fact that people come from other places and people are different. And we respect that, as long as they respect the fact that everyone's different. And out of that becomes the national motto, which is, out of many one, e pluribus unum. So the clown show has to stop, and we have to not be naive, and I've been guilty of this, of what he's up to, but also the people who've created this. And this is, you're reading Jade Mayer's work. How many people have read Dark Money? It's a great book. I mean, I can't promote books, but it's I like to read books. So it just talks about how a network of very wealthy libertarians invested in changing our national dialogue. And part of that investment was Citizens United. So conservative and liberal progressives and conservatives, that's part of our mix. As those of you who've come, one of my favorite stories about Jefferson is when you go into Monticello, if the docent is doing their job, she tells a story about how Jefferson put a bust of himself and Hamilton facing him, and somebody asked Jefferson, "Why'd you put Hamilton there? You don't agree with him on anything." And Jefferson said, "That's why." So this robust debate between people is part of our history. With all of our, you know, when he said that, only white men who owned property could vote. So, you know, it wasn't a perfect union then, and it isn't now, but we aspire to that. And the way we aspire to it is to agitate when we see things that are wrong and fight like hell, which we have to do right now, to go back to the basic premise that differences of opinion are part of what this country is about, but you have to play by the goddamn rules, and that's the Constitution of the United States of America. My Irish mother would kill me. I just said goddamn in front of 1,000 people. Catholic.
Our next question is from Albert. AI, though a new technology, has proven itself a powerful tool at finding data-driven solutions to processing problems, both verbal and quantitative. Have you or your colleagues tried to use AI to craft policy yet, or do you plan to in the near future?
Yes. I think you just have to be careful about the marketing of technology. Sometimes I have a friend, Roger McNamee, who wrote the book Zooked. He was one of the first investors in Facebook. And he feels very strongly that AI right now is being over-marketed to attract more venture capital, which was his argument about social media. So it takes a while for us as a country to work through our legislative process to go, well, these are the good things in change, but these are the things we found out that may not be good. And then you've got to pass legislation through the process to frame it. Now, in California, we used to be told by lobbyists frequently in Sacramento, if you question any of the new technology, then you're stifling innovation. So there's a balance there, and especially in California. I always like to say to my colleagues, there's a saying in the Congress, ABC, anybody but California. It's great, because it's a wonderful sort of combination of respect and envy. So my response is when some of my colleagues say that, particularly with ours after their name, I'm saying, well, what you're afraid of with California is we're not afraid of the future. We run towards it. We always have on the West Coast. So sometimes we go too fast for the rest of the country. So we got to remember that. On AI, I think it has tremendous possibilities and realities right now. In the transportation field that I've spent a lot of time in, there's lots of good things on managing our transportation systems with data and with technology and prospectively with AI. We've looked a lot at, for instance, truck convoys. Well, you go down Highway 5, AI would be great if it's properly done there. But the EU's working on this too. So the question on data collection and AI is it's got great possibilities, but I would use the Greek medical oath that doctors take just as a caution, first do no harm. So push the innovation, but when you see things that are being misused or taken advantage of, then we as a society have to have a conversation about it, and it's about who we elect and what we do about making sure why we're respecting that wonderful thing about America, about running towards the future. We're also saying maybe you're leaving some people behind, or there's secondary consequences that the people who are marketing it don't always see the same way.
Next question.
That was my brother up there.
Our next question is from Dana. What are the Democrats going to do when they hold the reins of power again? If we don't make structural changes, such as getting money out of elections, we'll all be back in this auditorium in 8 years.
Yep, absolutely. And to the point about not having a plan, we do have a plan. It's getting more robust every day. So we go back to what we did in the first 2 years where we had controls of both houses and President Biden. We did the biggest infrastructure bill since Eisenhower president, arguably the biggest in the history of the country. We did $400 billion in changing our energy sources, so we saved the planet. And that's a big thing for here because California leads the country. And as some of you have heard, I spent 10 years on the California Air Resources Board, which is one of the lead agencies in the world on this. I was appointed by 2 Republican governors and 1 Democrat. So that's $1.5 trillion just in federal funds, and then it gets multiplied by local and state funds because it's required to have a maintenance of effort to get those grants. And then we put another almost $1 trillion into keeping the economy going and keeping people employed and restaurants open during COVID, which I don't think we get enough credit for. There was a risk there because the economy, thank you. And we debated this. The risk was it would cause inflation because you were putting money into the economy. But if you didn't do it, people would have been unemployed and out of work and couldn't pay their mortgages. So I get frustrated with Democrats because we don't focus on that enough. It was Sophie's choice in the sense that you were either going to have a goddamn depression or you were going to have inflation. And that doesn't say that inflation doesn't have to be addressed, particularly now post-COVID, post the worst part about COVID. So those 3 things we did, and we have to keep doing. And then the things we couldn't get passed in that year because we couldn't get 1 senator from West Virginia, if you remember who he was, to give us the vote. We would have had a wealth tax. We would have changed the corporate tax system. We would have gotten rid of dozens of loopholes that are in particularly corporate taxes that do no benefit or very little benefit to the general public. They're there because they had relationships with people who voted. So we would have done all that, and now we have to do it. When we get control, we have to show the American public who's working for working people and the vast majority of people, and it's got to be like the goddamn New Deal. It's just got to, we're going to have it, and we're going to introduce it, and we're going to put pressure on everybody to vote for it, but we have to demonstrate that chart, we're changing it. So everybody, if you work hard, you have opportunities, and your kids, you know, all most Americans want is to have their kids grow up and be able to have the same opportunities or more than we had. So be able to afford a house, get a good job, have medical care, and have a pension. That's what we need. We will do that, and I can go with great specificity that will bore you all to death. But we've got a whole litany of bills, and I'm happy to point you in the direction. You can go to our website and look at what we're doing and what we're going to keep doing. I think we have to be much more aggressive about this so that we'll be able to change the situation. I have a CEO text that I did with Bob Reich when I was in the legislature, and it just says if you're a CEO of a publicly traded company, you can't make more than 300% of your average worker. When the American middle class was thriving, it was 30%. Now it's over 500% for Fortune 100 companies. So again, there's nothing wrong with making that money, but that's what creates this concentration. One city has done this, Portland, and they use it for homeless programs, which I think is great.
Our next question comes from John. As a ranking member of the House Ethics Committee, what can you do to prevent SCOTUS justices from accepting large gifts or POTUS from using taxpayer dollars to throw a party at Mar-a-Lago to pump up the value of his meme coin value among investors?
Well, as a member of the House Ethics Committee, I don't have control. We have 3 branches of government and 2 houses in the legislative branch. So our focus and our rules are members of the House. So if you remember Matt Gaetz, I was very involved in that. George Santos. Fortunately, I couldn't talk about most of this stuff until it came out. The House Ethics Committee is a lot like a grand jury. You can't talk about it when you're investigating it, and you're quasi-judicial, so you can only talk about it when you go, when it's done. I had a great interview on, I think, MSNBC during the Matt thing, and I really loved what the commentator said when I got through. She said, well, he didn't say much, but then again, he said a lot. So it's really a challenge to be. But the ethics is, if you can't trust people, knowing we have differences and different levels of honesty and human nature, it doesn't work. Trust is, in legislative bodies, you become, whether it's a city council or the legislature, you get a real quick reputation of whether you can be trusted, your word can be trusted or not. It doesn't make, it's Republican or Democrat. So if you don't get things done. The problem is the trustworthy people, I used to have this conversation with my predecessor, George Miller, the 80-20 rule of any human sort of endeavor. It's not always same 20, but the 20% of the people doing the work the way we should has been, it's been going lower than 20%. So just the ethics and the trust are really important. Jeffrey Rosen, who's the head of the Constitutional Center, went to that school with an H in it that I mentioned before, brilliant writer. He's got a book called The Pursuit of Happiness, Why the Pursuit of Virtue is Important. And it's a wonderful book about how the founders were very attached to the Greeks and the Romans. And it was that if you had, it's the biblical expression, to those who much is given, much is expected. Well, similarly to people in positions of power in a democracy, we expect you to be honest. You can have differences of opinion or different parties, but if you're just lying all the time, it doesn't work. And that's what we're seeing right now.
Next question is from Mia. January 20th executive order, gender passports, way beyond don't say gay, it's don't be trans. It outs most vulnerable protected classes. Are there any course of action that you could take or recommend?
Again, we've got bills that defend people's rights, and we're fighting them in the courts. So I don't want to answer every question with the same, but we have to protect people, the most vulnerable amongst us. And as our culture accepts, we've come a long way. I mentioned at the beginning of the country, but particularly here in California, we're so good at. I have 4 siblings. My 2 oldest siblings are gay, and the other 3, we always laugh about. They've been in long-term married relations and are successful. So accepting the fact that trans people have a right that should be protected constitutionally and legislatively is something we have to keep fighting for, and we will, and we are. But he is... This is an old historical ploy in America, by the way, demonizing other people. So this is not a new thing to us, unfortunately, but the better angels of our nature, as Lincoln said, trans people deserve to be defended legally.
Our next question is from Paul. Can Musk or Trump unilaterally cut Social Security and Medicare benefits for seniors, or does that require a vote of Congress?
Yes, it requires the latter. This is one of the problems. Executive orders have very limited authority, and this is a tension between the executive branch and Congress for years, but this isn't a normal tension. He can't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. So this is a big thing when we go back on Monday or Tuesday. The budget that the majority party passed, the Congressional Budget Office, Kaiser Family Foundation, a well-respected, based here in the Bay Area, and others have evaluated their top-line budget. So now we'll go back and start figuring out how they're going to meet their budget. So each committee has to have hearings going, this is where we can meet the cuts. So being on education and transportation, we'll go through that discussion. What CBO said and what Kaiser and other respected nonpartisan analysis said, you can't reach the targets they have put in their budget without cutting Medicaid and Medicare and our health system, amongst other things. And you can't lay the people off who enforce it and not expect the same level of service. So he can't do what he's trying to do, and we need the courts to continue to view that the way it is. If he wants to change those things, there's a process. You get somebody to introduce a bill. I feel like a high school civics teacher here. It goes to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee, of which I used to be vice chair, sees them all, and they are required by rules to assign them to committees of jurisdiction based on what that jurisdiction is. And then it goes to appropriations if it costs money, and the appropriators decide. You can't just be king and say we're going to cut this way. You know, democracy is a lot of work. And there are a lot of people in the world right now, unfortunately, I think it's too much work. But as Winston Churchill said, it may be the worst form of government ever found by human beings, but it's better than everything else we've tried.
Our next question is from Kathy. How can the administration be held legally responsible to uphold the Constitution when Trump and his regime refuses to follow judges' rulings in the Supreme Court? What are Democrats and all the senators going to do?
Well, that's the question. I mean, literally, when we go back, that will be, I mean, I've had these conversations with my Republican colleagues, some who I get along with, some I don't. What are you going to do for America when he violates the Supreme Court order? Whose side are you going to be on? The Supreme Court is when they releasing somebody who was taken illegally to another country, and he just blows it off. You can't do that in this country and have a democracy. So they'll. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm going to tell you, these are scary times. I've been along, part of it was owning restaurants. I've been pretty good at being able to separate chaos from sleeping and getting to work. But I don't sleep well right now, to tell you the truth, because of that question and others. This is territory that this country has not gone through since the Civil War. That's how bad it is. So if he's going to defy it, we're going to fight like hell, and we're going to fight like hell to find 3 Republicans to say, God damn it, stand up for the U.S. Constitution. Jamie and I have talked a little bit about the other way to get legislation passed is something called a discharge petition. So you write a bill, you take it down, and when you get to 218, which is a majority of the House, it goes right to the floor. So Speaker can't keep it. But we need 3 Republicans to join us to sign that. So I had one that I got a lot of good press on when they wouldn't, when we were stuck and they wouldn't do the budget a year ago. So my idea is let's do it when he does that. The discharge petition is there, every Democrat signed it, and we just stand there and say, and it's an impeachment discharge petition. We said we need 3 Republicans to vote. I'm sorry there's not a better answer to that. The other answer is what we're all doing here and out there in the streets is show, I mean, there are 1,000 people there at a town hall. This is really good. It's too bad we live in this environment, but this is what we need to do. We need to be angry and engaged and use every possibility to put pressure on your electeds, myself included, to keep doing everything we can to stop from losing American democracy.
Next question is from Cheryl. With a lot of new housing coming to downtown Lafayette, what is the chance of getting federal funding for a new fire station to house a new ladder truck?
That's great. I love firefighters. My Boston Irish mother, her dad was a firefighter in Lowell, Massachusetts. God bless him, Tom Burke. Those Irish Catholics, you know. So we've got to get, the firehouses are important for emergency response, and Contra Costa's done a really good job at this, and it's hard. So we can get federal funds. I'm happy to talk to you or the mayor afterwards about what the needs are. There's a fairly sophisticated calculation of where they need to be, what the response times, what the population is, and actually I think this county has done a really good job of doing that. And then we need to get really well-trained people who go in and become paramedics. In Contra Costa, when I was on the board, we were one of the first big counties that incentivized and paid people to get paramedic training. So every unit that goes out there has a higher level of skills. So if you're in cardiac arrest, you're going to get amongst the fastest responses with the highest trained people possible on the first responder, which is usually a fire truck, not the ambulance system. So I'm happy to work with you. It's an important issue, and we've done a lot on that. It's a challenge here in La Marinda, just because, just like the fire challenge is unique. It's a beautiful area, but sometimes it's hard to move people.
Next question is from Rachel. How do we enforce SCOTUS rulings when Trump is immune from prosecution?
So God, you guys have great questions. You know, Ellen Tauscher, when she was a member of Congress, God rest her soul, she liked to talk about how there's 3 national labs on either side of this district, and how smart people are. And she used to smile and go, I get elected by the smartest people in the country. Always got to laugh. So when I hear your questions, I think of Ellen, and it's like, yeah. This is back to the other question. It's just we've got to keep banging on them. Standing here, I have to tell you, I went to a little Jesuit college in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I used to play basketball with somebody named Clarence Thomas, who was a senior when I was a freshman. I agree. Completely. There's another great Jane Mayer book about, what is it called? It's about him, which is really a remarkable book about his development and how he sees the world. But we're going to, again, we've got 3 branches of government, we got to fight like hell. And when we've got to have a discussion about, Senator Merkley has a whole package about corruption on the Supreme Court, because all this stuff happened with with Thomas and with Alioto, and nothing's done because they self-govern. Well, basically what we need to do is take the same rules we apply to other federal judges and have an independent body be able to come out and remove them from office. It's really awful what's happened. I mean, if you've read, it's just unbelievable, the unethical behavior by people on the Supreme Court. Not all of them, but the ones I just mentioned.
So we've got enough time for 2, maybe 3 more questions. Our next question comes from Grace. Please address what is being done to address the attack on freedom of speech from students to the press to green card holders, lawyers, universities. It appears that in many of the cases it comes down to just simply restricting freedom of speech. It comes down to restricting freedom of speech.
So I'm, as I've said, on the Education Committee, and I'm on the Higher Education Subcommittee. What he's doing, again, is dividing people and playing on Americans' not always attractive side. I mean, they call it elitist. And there is some of that, we've got to admit. But without Franklin also said, the best investment Americans can make is an investment in education. So you think about the literacy rate when this country was founded is less than 1%. Well, because of Franklin's vision and a lot of people through the years, places like this, as much struggle as we have on testing scores, that we've got to do better. And we have examples in other countries that do better than us. But we have to invest in education. So free speech, and the founders decided to flip Roman and British law when it comes to liability and protecting free speech to what's called caveat emptor, mostly contract law. But it permeates our law is that that's caveat emptor means buyer beware. So holding people accountable when they lie, our people have to be educated enough to know when people are lying. Now, can we hold them better accountable? Absolutely. But it's part of the environment in this country that's sort of like innovation and responsibility, is we've got to get it right. But what they're doing to higher education, I sat in the hearing, if any of you remember, when we had the president of Harvard, Columbia, spacing on the other two, all women, by the way. And it was just awful what the Republicans did. I mean, awful. And the president of Harvard had to resign, and they were overcoached, to tell you the truth. They should have been more direct because the questions were awful. But this attack on higher education and education is very un-American. And I would say to some degree it's deliberate, because it's easier to fool people who can't read and write and can't question whether they're Republicans or Democrats. So having a public education system that helps kids to be able to critical think and make their decisions for themselves, as Franklin said, it's the most important investment Americans can make. The more direct question is how you hold them accountable and control them is the same things I've said before. Is challenge them in court where we're winning, even with conservative judges, and getting out and vote. I have to stand for election every 2 years. I've always been fine with, if you get sick with me, I'll go find something else to do, but I'll fight like hell to keep the job in the meantime.
So this next question is going to be our last, but I will point out that, as you see, we have a large number of questions. We will get them answered. Bear with us. As you could imagine, we've had a lot of town halls recently, and we're trying to answer them as quickly as possible, but please do have patience with us. We're a limited staff. Additionally, if you have friends that want to watch the town hall, or if you'd like to rewatch the town hall, it's available on the Congressman's YouTube page, as well as on his Facebook to rewatch, and the slides will be on his website. This question, unfortunately, respectfully, is of a political nature, so I'm going to have to grab another one.
We're creating infrastructure to do more political town halls so we can be less inhibited based on the, I think, appropriate rules in this venue.
I was 0 for 2 on that. It's another political one.
I will say that the person I told you about, Bernie and AOC, their town halls are all on the political side. So that's one of the reasons you hear the tone they have. Unfortunately, as I explained to her, I am not capable of raising $6 million in 3 months. I succinctly told you is when the person said I need to be more like her, which I agree, but then look at me. But this is part of our learning process, though, in these very unusual times, is learning how to adapt to it as quickly as possible.
So our last question comes from Carrie. I'm autistic, and I'm part of Autistic Women's Alliance. What does California and you plan to do to keep the NIH from accessing medical data without anyone's consent and fabricating conclusions and declaring autistic people as unworthy of support of life or eugenic policies?
I'm sorry to be repetitive, but we've got to do what we're doing. And what you just did is important. I have had a long, wonderful relationship with the development of the disabled community. Part of it was inherited from my predecessor and his father, George Miller. His father was a state senator who was absolutely terrific on DD issues. We've got 2 wonderful facilities in Richmond and in Concord that are named after him because he created them, because not enough both adults and kids were getting the professional services they need. Since that time, we've learned so much about special needs kids. So I did a floor speech on this on the Department of Education. The Department of Education protects the most vulnerable, including special needs kids who are autistic kids. We see this increase in autism that we're trying to get a hold of. Those are the people who protect those kids and give school districts the money and the support they need. Here, we've put more money in California in schools, but I had the superintendent at Brentwood when I was a state senator say, even with the extra money you gave us, we still can't come close to making our special needs payments. When Gerald Ford signed the IDEA legislation, Individuals with Disability in Education Act, Gerald Ford. It was bipartisan. There was this acknowledgement that kids who had disabilities needed to have a public education and they should be protected. This president is attacking that by eliminating the people in the Department of Education. I will be at a demonstration in front of the Department of Education next week with a group of like-minded colleagues. This is... Those aren't bureaucrats. Those are people who are protecting the most vulnerable amongst us and giving them the services that allow them to live in the community and contribute to all of us. So to answer the question, this is a priority for me. I've been very proud of the fact that that community looks at me as one of the leaders in Congress. I've carried a number of bills. We're going to carry a number of bills to get all those people back. And for school districts and one of the things about autism, it's, it's not in poor communities, it's not in wealthy communities, it's everywhere. And we have to help these kids. And taking thousands of employees who are there to do it by law and then moving them to another department, if they keep them in a department, the health department, that lost half of their staff, 10,000 people, you can't, I mean, come on. It's like selling a car to somebody. What, do you think we're stupid? You can't cut the people and expect these kids to get the same service they did before. And by the way, the federal government was supposed to spend 40% when Gerald Ford signed that bill. The highest we've ever got is 12%. So you're cutting what wasn't sufficient in the first place. And we have programs that work. It's a good return on investment. These kids can be amazing contributors to our communities, and they are in this community. But you have to give them the support and the science that allows them to do it. You probably tell I'm mad as hell about what's happened to this. Ryan tells me we're all done. Could you give a round of applause to Lance Corporal? You must have a Marine over here. He's a former Marine, so someone was doing the hoot over here. Semper Fi, bro. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Please stay engaged. We're going to keep doing these. As long as you keep coming, I'll keep doing them. And one last thing, I have 15 employees to serve 750,000 people. Our office has been recognized twice by a nonpartisan, the Congressional Management Office, for the way we work our office. 15 people have to answer before January 20th. We got about 1,000 emails a week. We're now up to 6,000. So in addition to doing all this, so thank you all very much.